All praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Peace to you in the name of Jesus. This is your brother Elisha Israel of the House of the Faith. And I count it truly blessing each and every single time that I can come before the priest to work God, and never do I count it as a light thing to do so. I'm coming on a little late this Sabbath. So my apologies. But nevertheless, I want to get right into today's topic, and the title is Flee Fornication. Again, that title is Flee Fornication. And fornication is simply, it's an umbrella term. You see it in the New Testament. It comes from a peace to you, brother. It comes from the word porneia. Okay, you hear that word, it's the root of words like pornography. Okay, fornication on film. All right, so what porneia is, it's just any illicit sexual behavior. Okay, commonly it is referring to sex outside of marriage, but it could, peace to you, sis, but it's an umbrella term. So it's like all of bestiality, homosexuality, or homosexual sex, illicit sexual behaviors with close kin, all that is under that, can fall technically under that term, but commonly, more than likely, it's, you see it when it's referring to, or it's sex outside of the confines of marriage, because we find in the Bible that the act of sex is supposed to be within the confines of marriage. And we're going to see that even in the Torah, and we're going to see that certainly in the New Testament. Okay, so I want to start off I want to touch upon where we're at right now. And I want to deal with a few statistics, because there are built-in consequences for disregarding Torah, for disregarding what the Word of God says. So it's like on your way to hell, you're going to have problems because of the decision that you made. Okay, for example, murder and thievery, that's against Torah, right? That's a violation of Torah, but also in regard to man's law, it can have you in jail or put you in jail. So that's just an example. Same thing with fornication, okay? I'm here to tell you right now that men shouldn't be dealing with all these women that are not their wives, shouldn't be just jumping from woman to woman to woman to woman, being a whoremonger. And women certainly should not be dealing with all these men. Okay, but that's what you see going on amongst our people. And it seems as if, quite frankly, we don't really, it doesn't seem that we value marriage when you look at certain statistics. So I want to look at a few statistics. This is from the CDC. It's entitled, this is from 2017. Okay, you understand it's something they have to catch up as far as the years go. So it might be a year or two behind when you're talking about collective statistics like this, like the abortion rate, same thing, which I'll talk about that as well. STDs and race, sexually transmitted diseases surveillance 2017. STDs and racial ethnic minorities. Disparities continue to persist in rates of STDs among some racial minority or Hispanic groups when compared with rates among whites. This is also true across a wide variety of other health status indicators, providing evidence that race and Hispanic ethnicity in the United States are population characteristics strongly correlated with other factors affecting overall health status, such as income, employment, insurance coverage, and educational attainment. Okay, so I just want to go over some of these statistics. Okay, so here are some of these. When you look at some of these STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, you'll find that what they call them blacks, African Americans, so-called Negroes, are at the top. Okay. Chlamydia, for example. In 2017, the overall rate of reported chlamydia cases among blacks in the United States was 1,175.8 cases per 100,000. The rate of reported chlamydia cases among black women was 5 times the rate among white women. Okay. The rate of reported chlamydia cases among black men was 6.6 times the rate among white men. And the reason the rate of reported chlamydia cases among Black women aged 15 to 19. So now we're talking about teens, was 4.5 times the rate among white women the same age group. So it goes on with that. So why am I reading about this? Because this is the built-in consequences for fornication. Gonorrhea. In 2017, the overall rate of reported gonorrhea cases among Blacks was 548 per 100,000. The rate of reported gonorrhea cases among Blacks in 2017 was 8.3 times the rate among whites. In 2017, this disparity was similar for Black men, 8.9 times the rate among white men, and Black women, 7.6 times the rate among white women. Primary and secondary syphilis. In 2017, 33.7% of reported PNS, that's primary and secondary syphilis cases with known race and Hispanic ethnicity, excluding cases with missing information on race and Hispanic ethnicity, and cases whose reported race was other Hispanic ethnicity, was no or unknown, occurred among Blacks. Okay. The rate of reported PNS syphilis cases among Blacks in 2017 was 4.5 times the rate among whites. The disparity was greater for Black women, 5.2 times the rate of white women. Then for Black men, 4.5 times the rate among white men. All right. So just when you look at this, you see, okay, congenital syphilis. In the same year, 39.1% of congenital syphilis cases with known race and Hispanic ethnicity occur among Blacks. Now you think about that, we roughly 12 to 13% of the population. Okay, the rate reported cases of congenital syphilis among Blacks was 6.1 times the rate among whites. The rate of reported cases of congenital syphilis was 35.5 cases per 100,000, which is among live births, which is 3.7 times the rate among whites. Okay, so you find that when you're looking at sexually transmitted diseases, you see them more amongst our people. Let's look at, this is from the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation, and it's Black Americans and HIV AIDS, the basis. Now they're using, the CDC and other entities, other reports to find out these facts. Say Black Americans have been disproportionately affected by HIV/AIDS since the epidemic's beginning, and that disparity has deepened over time. Although they represent only 12% of the U.S. population, Blacks account for a much larger share of HIV diagnoses. 43% people estimated to be living with HIV disease, 42%, and deaths among people with HIV, 43%, than any other racial group in the United States or the U.S. Those numbers, peace to you, sister, those numbers are astounding. I'm gonna read that again. Although they represent, talking about Black folks, although they represent only 12% of the U.S. population, Blacks account for a much larger share of HIV diagnoses, 43%. People estimated to be living with HIV disease, 42%, and deaths among people with HIV, 43%. Among Black Americans, Black women, youth, and gay and bisexual men have been especially hit hard. So these are just some of the statistics. When you look at the statistics, they are astounding. And that is because, again, these are the built-in consequences for sin. This is the built-in consequence for fornication. Says today there are more than 1.1 million people living with HIV/AIDS in the U.S., including 468,800 who are Black. Again, we are 12%, roughly 12% of the population. The rate of new HIV diagnoses per 100,000 among Black adults or adolescents, 41.1, was 8 times that of whites, 5.1, and more than twice that of Latinos, 16.1. In 2017, the rate of Black men, 77.6, was the highest rate of any group, more than twice that of Latino men, 36.4. The second highest group, Black women, 24.9, was the highest rate among women. These numbers are astounding when you look at them. New cases of HIV, 41% of those cases are Black. Just put that into perspective. Okay? I also want to read this here because all this is related. When you look at the number of abortions, again, so now this is from CNN, news, and this is from a CDC. They're reporting the CDC report, abortion surveillance, and it's roughly the same. So when you look at it, it says 36% of abortions abort Black babies. Although Black Americans comprise, they say 13.4% of the U.S. population, they accounted for 36% of the abortions in 2015, which was almost identical to the percentage of abortions that year among white Americans, who make up 76.6% of the population. So we're making up 13.4% of the population and having the same rate in that year, the same rate of abortions roughly. It's one. Blacks at 36%, they had 36.9, and they are 76% of the population. Why is that? Because these babies are being conceived outside of the confines of marriage. And to people who are oftentimes not in a position, a baby basically is inconvenient. And so you have women having 1-2 abortions at young ages. Okay. Even when you look at like places like New York City, where you have more abortions, and you have more abortions than live births. So what is that? Because that's a result of fornication. So these are all the built-in consequences of fornication. Okay, sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies. Okay, now and then, look, men, you if they are having the children, oftentimes they're brought into conditions that are not ideal, okay, which lead to another group of problems. Okay, so if you want to find out anything on abortion, you can go to Gutmacher or you can go to the CDC. Okay, I'm reading from an article, and they are getting it from the CDC. But again, Gutmacher, like when you get like Planned Parenthood, their statistics, that's where you can go for that, or you can go to CDC. Those are the two places. Those are the, they keep track of that. Okay, so now I want to go to 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, and I want to see something that Paul said. He says so what your body was made for. Okay, I did the lesson on yesterday. I did the lesson on, what you were created to be. But he says what your body was made for. He says in verse 15, 1 Corinthians 6 and 15, he says, know ye not that your bodies are the members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them the members of an harlot? God forbid. So he said, don't you know your body? You are one with Christ. You're a member of Christ. And he said, what? Know ye not that he which is joined to an harlot is one body? So when he talked about being one, he's talking sexually here, just like you could be one with your wife. Okay. So when he says that, he's talking about coming together as one. He says, what? Know ye not that he which is joined to an harlot is one body, is one body, for two saith he shall be one flesh. So he took you all the way back to Genesis 2 there. And then he says, but he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. Then he says something, flee fornication. Flee fornication, meaning don't deal with it. Again, what is fornication? Illicit sexual behavior. He says, flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committed fornication sinneth against his own soul. Okay? Hold your, well, I want to pick up something real quick. So that's what people are doing. He's telling, the Bible's clear on this. It's telling you to flee that. Okay? So, also you see, but that's what people are doing. Let's go to Romans. Let's go to Romans, the first chapter. Romans, the first chapter, and Romans, first chapter, chapter 1 and verse 24. He says, wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Verse 26, for even the woman, or said, for this cause God gave them up to vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. See, that's an example of the built-in consequences for sin. See, homosexuality, what does the Bible tell you? Real quick, Leviticus, just so we know, Leviticus, the 18th chapter. Leviticus, the 18th chapter, and verse 22. It says, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is abomination. So he says it's disgusting unto him, but see, he says, and Paul says, hey, you're receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was me. That's an example, and that falls into the battle of fornication, of how when you're dealing with illicit sexual behavior, how it could lead you to doing something that is destructive, okay, because of your lust. See, that's anatomically incorrect. It violates natural law. It violates Torah. I'm talking about same sexual intercourse, same-sex intercourse. So that's an example of that. What I was saying earlier, the built-in consequences. But you don't have to have homosexuals engaged in sex to have some built-in consequences. You see, when I was reading, a lot of that was just heterosexuals, but you doing things in the improper way. So if you out here playing a harlot, right, and you dealing with all these women as a whoremonger, and these women are playing a harlot, then you're gonna have what you have now: a bunch of sexually transmitted diseases and a bunch of abortions. It's inappropriate. That's just like when I a few lessons ago, I was dealing with how in Atlanta they have the HIV/AIDS rate is like sub-Saharan Africa. It was 50% in some places in Atlanta. So you counties in Atlanta. So that's what I was, you need to and in the word, we need to understand that we can't operate like people do in the world. Okay? That's just, we shouldn't do that. Okay? I'm gonna pick it up at 5, Proverbs, the 5th chapter. Because he said, flee fornication. Why would you be one with a harlot? You sinning against your own body. So who should you be with? Let's go to Genesis 1. Or Genesis 2, rather. Genesis 2 and verse 23. Because here we see that Adam was put to sleep. The Lord said it's not good for him. There should be a law of fire to help me for him. So he extracts the woman out of the man from his rib. And then it says in verse 23, and Adam said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman. So he named her just like he had named the animals previously. And she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. It didn't say he's going to cleave unto a prostitute or jump off one of these names that they have for women. He didn't say that. It said his wife. Proverbs, the 5th chapter. Hear what Solomon had to say. He said in verse 15, Proverbs 5 and 15, drink waters out of thine own cistern and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad and rivers of waters in the streets. Okay. Let them be only thine own and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind and pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. Then he says, why wilt thou, son, my son, be ravished with a strange woman and embrace the bosom of a stranger? Talking about a foreigner. But he's saying, hey, listen, the one you need to be with is your own wife. So it shouldn't be some random woman. It shouldn't be somebody else's wife. That's also fornication. Even specifically, it's adultery if you're dealing with somebody else's wife, but that's also under the banner of fornication, because fornication is a broad term. Okay. Now let's go back to 1 Corinthians. Let's go back to 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter, because what should you do if you can't avoid? Because obviously it should be understood that we are sexual creatures. Okay. So now what should you do to avoid fornication? Paul tells us, 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter and verse 1, he says, no, now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Okay, so now we understand that he was a self-made eunuch, and he was that way for the kingdom's sake. We understand, as Jesus said, that gift is not given to everybody. Okay, so this is not a commandment that you need to not have a wife, because he said, nevertheless, to avoid fornication. So if you want to avoid fornication, he said, let every man have his own wife, and let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Okay, so that's how you avoid it. You be married. Now let's go, hold our finger here, and let's go to Exodus, the 22nd chapter, because it was even in the Torah we read, it wasn't that you were supposed to just, people have misread this thing and say, well, sex equals marriage. No, sex is the consummation of marriage. Sex is the consummation of marriage. Okay, that's what you do. Like you look at Mary and Joseph, Miriam and Joseph. When you look at them, they had not consummated their relationship. It's similar to being engaged, but it's not engaged because that's his wife, only he hadn't sealed the deal, if you will. Because today you say you engaged, and that don't mean it don't really mean anything if that person go out with somebody else. That isn't in a relationship. But you understand, according to Torah, if somebody was betrothed, because that's the term that's used, is they were betrothed, and then they dealt with somebody else. Let's say she betrothed to one man and she sleep with another man. Her and that other man would be put to death, just as if they had been married. It's all considered like adultery. But Exodus, the 22nd chapter, verse 16, because he didn't mean it for you to just be sleeping with all kind of people. And you see this even people in the so-called word, they'll be in the word and they'll be jumping from person to person. And that's not to be done. Exodus, the 22nd chapter and verse 16. It says, and if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, meaning she's not married, she's not betrothed to no other man, but this is consensual. He said, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. What does that mean? He has to basically pay, he has to go through the steps of making her his wife. Why? Because he went to one step before he should have. The first thing he needed to do was go to her father to see if he could obtain permission to make that woman his wife. This is patriarchy. This is not a matriarchy or a gynocracy like you have today. So it said a man had to go to his wife to his wife's or his potential wife's father first. Okay. And see, one of the problems, I'll just say this right now, one of the problems that we have today is there is no shame associated with fornication. There's no shame with children out of wedlock. There's no shame with abortions. There's no shame. They call it slut shaming. I mean, LOL, how dare you shame somebody for basically fornicating? But you need to be shamed. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Just like you shouldn't be a whoremonger, you shouldn't be playing the whore. Okay? So this is something that you'll see in the Bible. This is something here that said, listen, you could see that God set it up to where, hey, marriage is the thing that he wants. And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. If her father will utterly refuse to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. See, but he was supposed to go. You were supposed to go to her father in the first place, but since you didn't, you have to endow her to be your wife. Now let's go to Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter. Okay. So now that's a woman who he's endowed to be her wife. But let's say it's a man, he take a wife and she's not a virgin. See, this is go totally against this. It says in verse 13, Deuteronomy 22:13, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. What does he mean? He said, so this man went through the process of making this woman his wife, and she was not a virgin. See, the expectation was that a woman would be a virgin. That was the standard. Man, they so far from that now. What's the norm now? The norm now is that women and men start having sex about 16, 17 years old. So a woman who's about 16 years old, she started having sex in high school, 17. Now she acted a fool in college, then had a baby by she 23, then she about 27, 28. And then some man gonna get on his knee and ask that woman to marry him. What are you doing? She done been with all these men. That's what's happening right now. If they get married, a lot of people really don't want to get married right now. It used to be back in the day that if somebody got pregnant, man, our father come find you, he have a shotgun, say, you marrying Bessie. You marrying Mary Lou. Come on, I got the priest ready. Come on down. You marrying him. You marrying her. You know, but there's no shame today. And understand, man, quite frankly, it's gotten so bad because it wasn't always like this. It's gotten so bad. You're not even in a position to be married. because of the behavior. How you gonna be dealing with all these men, but then talk about what you demand as far as marriage expectation? You're not carrying yourself as somebody who want that. And today, a lot of women don't want that. But understand, this is how the Lord feels about it. This is Torah. This is instruction. So he said, then shall the father. So in verse 13, it says, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. Meaning his expectation was, is that a woman would be a virgin until she was married. It said, then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring forth the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city in the gate. So the tokens of virginity was what that cloth that was under that first sexual encounter. And when that hymen would break, that blood would flow, and that would be on it, and that was kept as a token of her virginity. It said, the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter unto this man a wife, and he hated her. And lo, he hath given occasions of speech against her, saying, I found not thy daughter a maid. So now he's talking about, so this case, he's talking about this woman he took to be his wife, saying, she wasn't a virgin. But that's bringing a bad name upon her. The father, like, no, she was a virgin. As a matter of fact, here's the proof of it. And it says, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city. That's the tokens of her virginity. Verse 18, and the elders of that city shall take that man and chastise him. And they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver and give them unto the father of the damsel. So they fined his butt. Why? It says, because he had brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. How dare you talk about that woman? See, there is honor in that, in being a virgin. You can't find a virgin today. But there is honor in that for a woman to be a virgin. Okay, I always say a virgin is something that a lot of women can't be. A lot of young people, young women rushing, young females rushing, trying to throw their virginity away, not honoring it. But it's something that we should honor as a society, as a people. But we've lost that totally. You go to the schools today, they're passing out condoms. Oh yeah, you want an abortion, you ain't got to tell your parents. It's all kind of stuff going on. I saw I think it might go to the Supreme Court, where even, and this is just the example of how this isn't sex per se, but it's they had a gender operation without parental consent. This is in a lot of different states. They could just do what they want to do. Allows children to get gender tests in California, Oregon. But now let's see if the thing be true. Let's see. I'm just showing you that or mentioning that because that's what's going on right now. Or young men, or young boys, they land with these girls. They ain't talked to their father about marriage. They ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, but they want to lay down with somebody and then get them pregnant and then leave. That shouldn't be the case. And see, that's a lot of this too is that women aren't being protected by men. I'm talking about young women aren't being protected and monitored by their fathers. It's all crazy. Even when you look at how young people, I'm saying young because it started early. Even when you look at how young people dress, young women in particular dress like harlots, like prostitutes oftentimes, in a very sexual manner. You see them at the store. They'll be with their parents. And they got on they got on shorts. I give an example. I'm talking about. I went to the store. I had to get something. This was this week, and when I had on shorts, her butt cheeks. This is not some club. I don't go to clubs. This is the supermarket. Her butt cheeks were out of her shorts. This is a common occurrence. But nevertheless, it says, so oftentimes that's associated with too. So you have sexual dress, lax standards of what's acceptable, no shame. You got baby showers for unwed. Listen, you got, quite frankly, we got a nation of bastard children. I know that's harsh. That's harsh language. And the children haven't done anything. It's their parents. Well, that's good and that's rare. And that's honorable. That's honorable. That is not the norm. That is certainly not the norm. That is not the norm. But so you got right now amongst our people, our out of wedlock birth rate is 77%. Okay. So you got almost 80% of children being born not in the confines of marriage. After slavery, and around the time of slavery, children born in wedlock were 90%. Now it's the opposite. That's a problem. And we see that problem being manifested in a variety of ways. Whether you talk about poverty, whether you're talking about lack of opportunity for our children, when you see what's happening to our young men in particular. Why? Because our homes are broken. So he said, but nevertheless, he said, but if this thing be true, meaning she wasn't a virgin. She wasn't a virgin when she was married. He said, but if the thing be true and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she hath wrought folly in Israel to play a whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. Okay, so she was expected to be a virgin. So she would be stoned, just like if a man dealt with another man's wife. That wife and the adulterer and adulteress would be stoned. Okay? Why? Because that's inappropriate. Let's go to let's see. It's the last place. We really the Bible, brothers and sisters, would repair our peace to you. Peace to you. Will repair our relationships, will repair our families. See, we right now, you don't know what to do. Right? You can't look at the world and think you got a standard of morality. But what you can do is look at the Bible. The Bible is our standard for morality. The Bible is telling us what we should and shouldn't do. So if you didn't know what you should do, it's telling us what we should do. So now, in 1 Corinthians, the 6th chapter, it says in verse 9, it says, know ye not? Let me pick it up in chapter 5. Because when there's sin, and I'm going to answer your question, Sister Sharon, in a second. When there's sin, in the church, it has to be addressed. Okay? And oftentimes you'll see this, even in the world, you'll see instances of where it's just certain things are going on. It's like, wait a minute, you have to address certain things. Just like they addressed it then to put sin away from among them, you have to address it in the congregation so that sin doesn't spread. Because ultimately it's about gaining salvation. But if you too afraid to tell people what they need to do or not do, then what we here for? 1 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and verse 1, he said, it is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles,